Welcome to Evolve with the Modern Caveman.
Welcome back to the show, everybody. Welcome to Evolve with the Modern Caveman. I'm your host, Gilbert Diaz, aka the Modern Caveman. And I gotta say, I am absolutely thrilled to have you join us again for another episode. I would like to also thank everybody who joined me for last week's episode, our very first episode of Evolve, and those who provided me with immeasurable, valuable insights on how that episode affected your life. Your responses were absolutely heartwarming, and I want you to know how much I appreciated them and how much I appreciate you. If you're joining us for the first time and you're curious to know what this podcast is all about, feel free to listen to last week's episode where I break down what my intentions are with this podcast and my hopes to impact as many lives as I possibly can. Engage me with your thoughts and your comments and your concerns, and I'll be happy to respond. That being said, let's dive into today's episode, an episode that I truly believe that will have an everlasting effect on your life. In last week's episode, I mentioned that June is Men's Mental Health Awareness Month. I also revealed in last week's episode a small part of my own personal struggles in the past with mental health, particularly with depression and anxiety. Now, originally, I had no intention of opening up further about my previous battles with depression so early on in the show. But in an effort to raise awareness regarding mental health, suicide, and depression, I felt that it was only appropriate to share my story further in hopes that it can provide some level of comfort to anyone who is currently battling in their mind and spark some hope for a brighter tomorrow. In honor of Men's Mental Health Awareness Month, I decided to dedicate the next two episodes to the unspoken war that is often waging between our ears. And that is this episode and next week's episode. Though throughout this episode, I will be referring mostly directly to men. Anyone who is listening or watching this episode can find immense value in the conversation that we're about to have. And it is a very important conversation. No matter the sex, I truly believe anybody will benefit from what we have to say today. So let's dive into this incredibly important and often overlooked topic, men's mental health. And also stick around to the very end of today's episode. Trust me, you won't regret it. I have a little treat for you. As many of you may not know, June is dedicated to raising awareness about men's mental health. And just as little is spoken about this month, so too are the daily struggles and the battles that men often keep hitting. It's time to shine a light on an epidemic that affects countless men, but is frequently left in the shadows, forcing men to literally suffer in silence. Men are expected to be strong, to man up, to remain stoic. Mental health issues in men are often seen as a sign of weakness and vulnerability, leading to a lack of support and understanding for those who are struggling. The stigma surrounding men's mental health can be incredibly isolating, and the societal pressures to remain silent only exacerbate the problem. Today, let's break the silence. Today, let's acknowledge that it is okay to not be okay sometimes. And men, let's break the stigma by sharing our stories with one another so that another man who may be walking down the same path that we once did can find strength in knowing that they are not alone. Let's work together to raise awareness foster understanding, and create a supportive community where anybody can feel empowered to speak and seek help. As I mentioned in the previous episode, depression was my drug, and it was my drug of choice, and I was heavily addicted to it. I can't remember the first time I felt it. All I remember is that I felt like I could not live my life without it. I was addicted to self-loathing. I was addicted to the attention that it brought me. And I was addicted to being a victim. And though my struggles were immensely painful, there was this toxic comfort in knowing that it will always be there, ready to receive me whenever I called upon it. Like many domestic abuse victims, I returned back for more. My earliest memories of depression that I can recall were in my preteen years when I became acutely aware of the extent of my father's addiction to drugs and alcohol. Now, I don't know whether it was this awareness that triggered my depression. All I know is that it was where I ran to escape. And the more I entertained the darkness, the tighter its grip became on my life. Depression was my dark friend. It was my dark friend that I cried to when no one else was around. Even after I accepted Christ into my life and my father had turned his life around and my household had began to heal, I refused to give up my depression. In part because I believed the lie that depression was a part of who I was. It had become my identity. I told myself that I hated it. I told myself that I wish I could fight against it. But the truth was, subconsciously, I think I loved it. It's what made me feel alive, even when it was killing me. My struggles with depression took a very dangerous turn after I proposed to my wife. Suddenly, I was making a life-altering decision that would change the course of my life, and I struggled to know if what I was the decisions that I was making, if I was truly prepared for it. My engagement became the worst year and a half of my life. I was torn between appeasing people and finding my own voice. I was making decisions that I wasn't confident in making. And I was trying to fulfill expectations so that people would like me. Everywhere I turned, I felt like someone new was pulling at me, telling me what I should or should not be doing with my life. I felt like my life was outside of my control, and I was spiraling downwards. I felt like the only escape that I had, the only options that I had, was to die. And I felt like if I couldn't control my life, how could I be worthy of it? Depression took a hold of me in a way that it had never done before. I felt like I was walking on quicksand, struggling to stay above the surface. I felt like everyone else was in control of my life. And I started to contemplate ways to die. I thought of throwing myself from the top of a building. I thought of hanging myself with a belt. I even went as far as closing my eyes while I drove, only to open them right before I could collide with anything. And just mentioning that, it's so weird for me because I look back on it and I can't even recognize the person. I was lost. I was hurting. I was drowning. I felt forgotten. Now, something that you guys probably may not know about me was that Back in the days, I was a pretty good poet. And during one of my deepest bouts of depression, I wrote this poem, and I even debated whether or not I was going to share it on this episode. Um, it's going to be the source of one of my future books that I am currently writing, which gets a little bit more in depth into my struggles and triumphs against depression. But I decided to share this poem today to illustrate the mental anguish that I found myself in. The name of the poem was The Forgotten Man. And I'm gonna read that poem. There once was a man, but he was no more. He is heard, but cannot be understood. Reason cannot define him, wisdom cannot comprehend him. He screams into darkness. His cries go unheard. He is invisible. His actions go unseen. He is a shadow indistinguishable from any other. He cries, but no one hears his groans. He's dying, but no one can save him. He speaks, but his words are not understood. He's searching, but doesn't find. His name will not last. His character will disappear. Memories of him shall pass away. His footprints will be dusted away. His image forever forgotten. His mark forever forgotten. His touch forever forgotten. For he is forgotten. He is the forgotten man. I wrote that poem sitting in the parking lot of my college, contemplating what I should do with my life. Thinking about all the ways I just wanted to die. And on April 22nd, 2010, exactly 1 month to the day of my wedding, I decided that on that day, I would kill myself. I remember waking up in the morning in this kind of just deep, deep sorrow, and I felt defeated, alone, and ashamed. I remember getting up from my bed and walking over to the desk. I opened up a Word document on my computer and I began to type. It was my suicide note. Now, I don't remember what I wrote, but what I do remember was that the letter was addressed to God. And at the end of that letter, I pleaded with God to grant me just one thing. All that I asked, and this is, as I recall this, it always hits home. All that I asked of God at that moment was that He remembered me. That He remembered that I existed. That He remembered that I tried. That He remembered who I really was. That He remembered my name. All I asked God was to remember me. I remember going to grab a box cutter, and then I walked to the nearest forested park because I didn't want my parents to come home and find me. I hid within the bushes, and I remember pressing the blade against the veins on my wrist. All I remember was praying that those very last words on my suicide letter. Remember me, God. Remember me. Please, please, God, would you just remember me? And just as I made the final decision to slide that blade against my skin, suddenly my phone rang and it interrupted me. And hard to explain, but I felt this deep impression in the depths of my heart. It wasn't an audible voice, but it was louder than anything that I could ever hear. And it said to me, I remember. I remember. I remember. But do you remember me? I immediately pulled the blade away from my skin and I returned home. I sat back on my desk and I deleted the letter and I just wept. And I wept for hours. And for weeks, I struggled to understand what had transpired that day. I struggled to understand how I had gotten to that point. And then 2 days before my wedding night, one of my groomsmen could see that I was completely down and out. He could see that I was defeated. And he asked me to drive him home. And I agreed. And while we drove, he spoke to me. And he told me that he can see that I was struggling. He told me that he can see that I was in immense pain. But he reminded me that despite my struggles, my fiance was still choosing to marry me. She was still choosing to fight this fight with me. She was still choosing to show up. And I needed to do the same. Then I remember him telling me, Gilbert, do yourself a favor. I know this isn't easy. I know that what you're dealing with is a daily battle. But do me a favor. And when you wake up in the morning, fight for a reason to keep living. Fight for a reason to be happy. At that moment, it dawned on me that my depression had blinded me to the love and the support that my then fiance, now my wife, had for me. And it reminded me of the voice that spoke into my heart a few weeks before. That voice had purpose. I remember I went home to my fiance and I surrendered myself. And I promised her from that day forward, I would find a reason to keep fighting. I would find a reason to keep living. I would find a reason to remember. To every person out there who is battling with depression, know this. You are not alone. You are not forgotten. The pain that you are experiencing is real and it is valid. The strength it takes to face each day, to get up and keep going is immense. And that strength is something that you need to be proud of. Keep on fighting. Keep on living. Keep finding a reason to be happy. Keep finding a reason to keep living. I want you to know that you are important. You are worthy. And never underestimate the hole you will leave in this world if you were gone. It's time that we redefine what it means to be strong. For true strength lies in acknowledging our vulnerabilities, in reaching out for help when we need it. It's found in the courage to say, I'm not okay, and to seek support from friends and family or professionals. It's in the willingness to break the silence and to share our struggles. We need to create a world where men feel free to feel free and safe to express their emotions, where seeking help is not seen as a sign of weakness, but of a mark of wisdom. Let's encourage each other to talk openly about mental health, to share our stories, and to listen without judgment. Let's build a community where every man and woman can feel supported and understood. Remember, there is no shame in seeking help. It is how we reclaim our lives. These are not signs of failure, but steps towards healing and self care. It's okay to take care of yourself. It's okay to prioritize your mental health. It's okay to prioritize yourself. And to those who love and support the men in their lives, just like my wife, friends, and family, your role is crucial. Be the ear that listens, the shoulder to lean on, the voice that encourages, and the one that pushes others to seek help. Your understanding and your compassion can make all the difference. Trust me, I know it. So let's stand together, united in our commitment to break the stigma surrounding men's mental health, or just mental health in general. Let's pledge to be there for one another, to lift each other up, and to fight this battle side by side. Remember, every step towards addressing our mental health is a step towards a brighter tomorrow. It's a step towards living a life filled with purpose, joy, and fulfillment. And to all the men out there, I want you to know that you are seen. You are valued. You are not alone. But most importantly, you are remembered. You're not forgotten. Let's face this together with courage, with strength, and with hope. If you enjoyed this episode and found value in what we had to say today, please share this podcast and the episode with a friend, a friend or a family member, or anyone that you believe can benefit from it. Remember to follow me on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at the handle Modern Caveman's Club. Also, remember to click the notification icon on your podcast platform of choice and also on your socials so that you are alerted anytime I post new content. Remember to tune into next week's episode as we close out Men's Mental Health Awareness Month in an episode that you don't want to miss. And I will also be sharing a little bit further the next chapter of my struggles and how I overcame and continue to overcome depression in my life. But before you go, I want to share with you a new poem that I believe redefines my new life, and hopefully after this episode it can redefine yours as well. The poem goes a little bit like this. In the shadowed corners of a bustling street walks a man whose heart bears a silent beat. With shoulders stooped and eyes cast low, he carries burdens few will ever know. The world demands he be strong and bold, to hide his pain, to fit the mold. Man up, they say, don't let it show. But inside, a storm begins to grow. He fights a battle no one sees. He whispers thoughts and silent pleas. A mask of strength, a guise so grand, yet he's the one, the forgotten man. He smiles through tears, he laughs through pain. In a world where sorrow's a silent chain, afraid to speak, to voice his plight, he wanders through the endless night. For in his heart a war does rage, a soul confined within a cage, longing for a hand to hold, for warmth to chase away the cold. O forgotten man, you are not weak. Your silence speaks what words can't seek. In every tear and in every sigh, a testament to the strength you hide. So let the world know. So let the world now understand the silent grief of the forgotten man. For in his heart a light still glows, a beacon of hope despite the woes. Rise up and share your tale. In vulnerability you shall prevail. For in your truth a strength renew. The world will see the hero that is within you. No longer lost, no longer lone. In shared embrace you're not unknown. The forgotten man now found and free. All because my God remembered me. God bless you. Share this episode. And as always, keep evolving the modern caveman way.